from the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight as we walk up to the NFL Draft. We are less than 2 weeks away, and the Broncos, of course, probably will not be moving back into the first round. Do have a bunch of day 2 picks. We'll obviously spend some time over the next week and a half talking about all that. But today, I wanted to talk about a bigger picture conversation. And we had this on our podcast, Broncos Country Tonight. You can find that at broncoscountrytonight.com/podcast, the radio show. And it was about the difference about being aggressive versus being patient. And it applies to the draft. It applies to a lot of what the NFL has become. We see what the LA Rams have been doing where in the Sean McVay era, they've never had a first round pick. And then you have George Paton, for example, now trading a couple of firsts for a quarterback, a couple of day 2s. You've got trades for Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, so on and so forth. The NFL seems to be shifting a little bit. And you talked about on the show earlier about market inefficiencies and how sometimes if you're doing something like this, it does seem to swing back the other way inevitably.
Well, right. And it is how it works. Analytics is about finding market inefficiencies and exploiting them. And the Rams stumbled across something that was basically a market inefficiency they were uniquely set up to take advantage of. You could trade away high-end draft picks for established players because you had the cash to be able to circumvent the cap. And there are other teams that are now sort of trying to copy that model. And the problem is that when you get a bunch of people trying to exploit the same market inefficiency, it's no longer a market inefficiency. It creates competitive balance and it brings it back up. So you talk about the pendulum swinging back and forth. That's what happens in these situations. Think about it like this. You get a league that runs the football all the time. So this team decides we're going to throw the football. We're going to spread you out and throw the football, a la the Patriots when they spread everybody out, whatever year that was, 07. I had to go back and look. And so all of a sudden you spread that out. Well, now all of a sudden you're getting one-on-ones with dime and quarter corners that probably aren't up to the task because most teams didn't carry that many corners at that time. Well, in order to combat that, every team's like, well, we need to get smaller. We need to get lighter on defense. So what happens to that team? Well, that particular Patriots team switched to a 2 tight end with Gronk and Hernandez and went and got large, and now all of a sudden they could run. That's exploiting market inefficiencies and swinging the pendulum. The problem is the league is a copycat league, and everybody tries to get on board with that, and then they're no longer efficient. So the same thing applies to drafting. The same thing applies to running a franchise, and we've seen that, like I said, with the Rams. I think that there is a roadmap for a general manager to be in the accumulation phase. And that's early on in your tenure. Early on, you want to be accumulate picks, accumulate assets, whatever. You want to accumulate stuff because your first year is kind of a richer year. But after that, like you need to be aggressive. You got to spend. You got to go out there because if not, you've accumulated all this capital, and the guy who winds up replacing you is going to be using it.
And, of course, all of this applies to the Broncos' decision to go after Russell Wilson. Right. So that's really all this ties back to is this is a little bit of the trend. Now, we'll get to some quotes from George Paton in The Athletic about this very topic, but it ties into this one from Brandon Staley, where he said, you're seeing all these teams make these moves, and I think that's what the NFL represents. You better be working to make your team the best it can be, or you're going to get left behind. And there's a little bit, it seems like a mentality shift in the NFL where it's like, I better be looking to be aggressive now, because if I'm saving capital for future years, if I'm kicking the can down the road, inevitably that's just going to be benefit to the next guy. And I think that's a little bit of where some of these teams' mindset, and maybe it's a little bit of recognizing what window you're in. But I think if you're ownership of any of the NFL teams, if you're a GM in these power positions, you're thinking about the right now, and you're taking as many swings as you possibly can because the pressure on your job only goes up incrementally afterwards.
Yeah, you have 31 general managers, but Packers situation, 32 GMs. You're all vying for Super Bowls, and there's only one Lombardi Trophy,
right?
And everybody's demanding that you win one. So if you don't, after a couple of years, like you're going to be replaced. They're going to churn the bottom of all that, and you
can't say, "Well, I was patient. Look how patient we were."
Yeah, that's not something you can walk into your boss's office and say, "Well, look at all these draft picks I got you while we were not winning."
Yes.
Even when the plan is to do that, you'll get replaced. Look at the Browns. When the Browns did that teardown, and Sashi was the general manager there, and that was the plan. They had a 5-year plan for all that, and then they axed him 2.5 years into it or whatever. So, I think that if you're looking around the league and you're looking at your team, you're in year one. You want to kind of evaluate the organization, the structure, the players, everything you've got going on to see if you've got a winning foundation. But after that, you have to identify that and be aggressive in fixing that. And then accumulation of assets is not just draft picks, it's players. Because if you don't go out and get those players, someone else will, and they'll use them against you.
Exactly.
Know? So the Brandon Staley's quote, I think is apropos in that regard, because if you're not importing talent, someone else is, and that creates your team's not going to be better for it. Theirs is, and you're probably going to lose.
Well, in the conversation we got into on Broncos Country Tonight, the radio show, was about how different things would look in the AFC West if the Broncos hadn't acquired Russell Wilson. What would be the conversation about the Broncos right now? Mm-hmm. They'd be saying, look at the rest of the division. They can't compete in this division. What is this team going to do? Mm-hmm. And we watched the arms race over the course of the offseason. It would be dramatically different. It doesn't matter if George Paton's hold on to those first-round picks. We wouldn't be saying anything about that number 9 overall pick for the Broncos, with the exception of loving a quarterback that they think is going to be the guy. We wouldn't be saying anything about that player, saying that transforms your organization overnight.
Well, right. There would be so much pressure on identifying a quarterback to do that right now, or stripping it down and rebuilding next year with one of the big guys, Bryce Young. You like C.J. Stroud.
I like them both.
Okay.
But again, you got to have a top 2 pick to be in that.
Right. And so there would be so much pressure to either identify the guy this year or be in position to get that the next year. And, I think George Paton recognized that, hey, Russell Wilson brings more to the table than anything else I could get right now. And I don't want to sit here playing the forecast 2 years in the future game, because if I'm doing that, I'm probably forecasting for somebody else.
So what he said in The Athletic, he said, our philosophy is, if it's unique, you do what it takes. Very rarely there is a franchise quarterback available. We thought that was a very unique situation, so we were aggressive in getting him. I can't speak for other GMs, but you just can't sit and wait and hope.
Did he say very unique?
Yeah.
Something is either unique or it can't be very.
I know, but whatever. It said you need to force the issue every now and then. So, but the point is, as a GM, you're tasked with knowing that balance. So back to our original point about being aggressive or being patient, you have to know that balance, and you have to play it perfectly. And you're judged a little bit on that, because if you're too aggressive, we've seen examples of that, right? The Jacksonville Jaguars this offseason, some people have said, I don't know. They're a talent. They needed a lot of talent on that team. So I think on the other side of that, we'll say, well, they added talent. Sometimes you got to pay extra for that.
Well, and they also had a ton of cap room, so they did
right.
spend at the floor.
But you know what I'm saying? Like right. There's a very fine balance there for almost any GM. This translates to the draft. This translates to free agency in the offseason, of being aggressive and being patient.
I think, and something we missed talking about on the show that maybe we can expand on some other time, I think there's a micro and a macro conversation to have there.
Sure.
Because I think that there's a sense of being patient for your guy, but not being patient as a fundamental philosophy. I think that, the aggressive acquisition of talent and draft capital should be things that you should be attempting to do. But at the same time, I don't think that you should be swinging on quarterbacks you don't believe in, because then you tie your franchise to a 4-year deal. You could have a Paxton Lynch situation. They didn't believe in Justin Fields last year. He's done nothing to prove that they should have. Maybe he turns into that guy, but I think they made the right call being patient and just taking the good player in Pat Surtain, while at the same time, you need to be aggressive in the sense that you are trying to stack your roster to win.
Yeah, that's a great point you bring up. Last thing on this, and you're right, we'll get a chance to talk about this down the road. We saw what happened to this franchise after missing on Paxton Lynch. It was dramatic for several years.
You kept
beyond
chances, hoping he would grow,
and you would do the same thing with another quarterback at 9. So for all the people that say you absolutely had to take a quarterback there, you had no choice, so on and so forth, I wonder why those people don't think about what it was like when you missed on that quarterback and giving that quarterback multiple chances, because that's what you do as your first rounder. You have to do that with your first rounder. It seems like we've forgotten that, but I certainly remember those years as following the Broncos, how rough it was, because you kept saying we have to give this guy more time. Mm-hmm. Didn't even make it through his rookie contract.
Yeah, couldn't get on the field, and that was the other part. I think that's the reason people forget it, is because he wasn't on the field. It was so he was so bad. He wasn't beating out the Trevor Simeons, the Mark Sanchez's, and so it was just a rough period. But you do that and the reason it sets you back is because you're drafting that quarterback, you're trying to build an offense around that quarterback, and situations like what the Cardinals did are just don't happen very often, where you draft a guy in the top 10 and then you're back in the top at number 1, can get your guy, reset your entire offense for a brand new head coach. That kind of stuff just doesn't happen very often. So most of the time, drafting a quarterback like that sets you back 3 years.
Good stuff. For Benjamin Allbright, I'm Ryan Edwards. Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight.